You seem tense.
Lily, let me help you. Relax. Richard Hartwell's hand slid across the mahogany conference table toward her, his fingers grazing the back of her wrist. The gesture was calculated, practiced, disgusting. His office door was closed. The blinds were drawn. And his smile, that predatory, self-satisfied smile, made Lily's stomach turn. She was trapped. My name is Lily Chen, and up until 17 minutes ago, I thought I understood how the corporate world worked. I thought talent mattered. I thought hard work paid off. I thought if you kept your head down and delivered results, you'd be safe. I was 28 years old, a senior project manager at Hartwell Industries, one of the most prestigious tech consulting firms in San Francisco. I'd clawed my way up from an entry-level coordinator position, working 80-hour weeks, skipping vacations, sacrificing relationships, all to prove I belonged in those glass towers downtown. I came from nothing, a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Daly City where my immigrant parents worked 3 jobs between them just to keep the lights on. Getting this job had felt like winning the lottery. But sitting in that locked office watching Richard Hartwell, Chief Operating Officer, Stanford MBA, married father of 3, lean back in his $4,000 leather chair with that look in his eyes, I realized something fundamental. The game was rigged from the start. The VP position, he said slowly, savoring each word like expensive wine. It's between you and Bradley. You know that, right? I knew. Everyone knew. Bradley Mitchell, Ivy League legacy admit, trust fund kid who'd never worked a real day in his life, was my only competition for the promotion. I'd earned 10 times over. His projects consistently came in late and over budget. Mine never did. His clients complained. Mine sent gift baskets and recommendation letters. You're more qualified, Richard continued, his voice dropping lower. Significantly more qualified. But Bradley has ... connections. His father sits on our advisory board. He paused, letting that sink in. However, I could make this very simple for you, Lily. I have considerable influence over these decisions. My throat went dry. I'd heard the rumors about Richard whispers in the women's bathroom, carefully worded warnings from former employees who'd left abruptly. But rumors were just rumors, right? Until they weren't. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew. God help me, I already knew. Richard stood up, moving around the desk with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences for anything in his entire privileged life. I'm suggesting that we could have a more personal working relationship. You're an attractive woman, Lily. Ambitious. I appreciate that. And I could ensure your career trajectory exceeds your wildest expectations. He was close now. Too close. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and cloying that probably cost more than my monthly rent. All you have to do, he whispered, his hand reaching for my shoulder, is be a little more flexible about how we work together. Starting tonight. I have a place downtown, very private, very comfortable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside Richard's office, I could hear the normal sounds of corporate life, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, someone laughing at a joke by the water cooler. The world was continuing like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't sitting here being propositioned by a man who held my entire future in his hands. My first instinct was to run. My second was to scream. My third was to do what I had been trained to do my entire life: smile politely, make excuses, and extract myself from the situation without making waves. But then something else happened. Something unexpected. I thought about my mother working the night shift at a hospital for minimum wage. I thought about my father, his hands permanently stained from years in auto shops, never complaining, always pushing me to make something of yourself. I thought about every woman who'd sat in this exact chair before me, facing this exact choice, and walked away with nothing because speaking up meant career suicide. And I thought, not this time. That's very generous, I said carefully, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Can I think about it? This is a big decision. Richard's smile widened. He thought he'd won. Of course, take the weekend. But Lily, he leaned down, his face inches from mine. Don't take too long. Bradley's father is putting on pressure, and my patience has limits. I nodded, stood up on shaking legs, and walked out of that office. The moment the door closed behind me, I ducked into the nearest bathroom and threw up. But here's what Richard Hartwell didn't know. What he couldn't possibly know. 3 months earlier, I'd attended a tech conference in Austin. At a late-night networking event, I'd met a woman named Sarah who worked in cybersecurity. We'd bonded over terrible hotel wine and shared stories about workplace harassment. She'd told me something that stuck with me, something I'd filed away in the back of my mind without really understanding why. Document everything, she'd said. And in this digital age, you've got more power than you think. That night I went home to my small apartment and I made a decision. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to accept Richard's disgusting proposal. And I wasn't going to silently walk away like all the others. I was going to burn his entire world to the ground. But I needed proof. I needed evidence so damning, so irrefutable, that not even Richard's Stanford degree and his board connections could save him. I needed him to confess, on record, in a way that couldn't be denied or spun by expensive corporate lawyers. And most importantly, I needed witnesses. Over that weekend, I researched everything I could about workplace harassment laws, recording consent in California, and corporate liability. I reached back out to Sarah, who connected me with resources I didn't even know existed. I practiced staying calm, controlling my breathing, not showing fear. Because I was about to do something either brilliant or completely insane. The following Monday, I walked back into Richard's office with my answer. But this time I wasn't walking in empty-handed. If you're relating to this story of standing up against power, make sure to subscribe to the channel because what happens next is something Richard Hartwell never saw coming. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Monday morning, 9:47 a.m. I walked into Richard's office carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the most professional outfit. I owned a navy blue suit my mother had helped me pick out for my first big client presentation 2 years ago. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I'd practiced this moment 50 times in front of my bathroom mirror. "Lily," Richard said, looking up from his computer with that same predatory smile. "I was hoping you'd come by. Have you thought about my offer?" "I have," I replied, sitting down in the chair across from him. "And I'd like to discuss the details. What exactly would this arrangement entail?" His eyes lit up. Hook, line, and sinker. What Richard didn't notice was the small pin on my lapel, a decorative piece that any corporate drone might wear. What he absolutely didn't know was that it contained a camera smaller than a pencil eraser. Live streaming directly to a secure cloud server Sarah had helped me set up over the weekend. "Smart woman," Richard said, standing up and moving to close his office door. "I knew you'd see reason. Too many talented people get hung up on outdated morality when they should be focused on advancement. So this has happened before?" I asked tearfully. He laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd asked something charmingly naive. "Lily, this is how the world works. You think all those female executives got there purely on merit? Please, everyone needs a mentor willing to invest in them." My stomach turned, but I kept my expression neutral. "And in return for this investment?" Richard sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that I could see the wedding ring he still wore despite what he was proposing. "You'd be available when I need you. Discreet dinner meetings. Occasional weekend trips when I travel for business. Nothing too demanding. And in exchange, I guarantee the VP position, a 60% salary increase, and my continued patronage as you climb higher." "What about Bradley?" "Bradley is a mediocre trust fund baby riding his father's coattails," Richard said dismissively. "But he's useful for certain networking purposes. However, if you agree to my terms, I'll find a way to sideline him. Perhaps a transfer to our Austin office. They're always desperate for bodies down there." I nodded slowly, as if seriously considering this devil's bargain. "And if I were to decline?" Richard's expression hardened. The mask slipped just a little, and I saw something cold and cruel underneath. "Then I'd be very disappointed. And disappointed, I tend to make decisions that ... reflect my emotional state. The VP position would obviously go to Bradley. Your current projects might get reassigned to team members who are more collaborative. Your performance reviews might start reflecting certain concerns about your teamwork and attitude. You'd sabotage my career." I'd be honest about my observations of an employee who lacks the flexibility required for senior leadership. He corrected, his tone suddenly sharp. Lily, you're smart enough to understand how this works. I'm offering you the easy path. The alternative is much, much harder. This was exactly what I needed. Clear quid pro quo. Explicit threats. His own words condemning him. I need to think about the timeline, I said, standing up. When would you need my answer? Richard's smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. End of the week. Friday. I'm announcing the VP decision next Monday, so you need to decide quickly. But Lily? He moved closer, invading my personal space deliberately. Don't overthink this. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to get what you want. I left his office with my evidence and something else, a burning determination to make him pay for every word. Every implication, every woman he'd done this to before me. But Richard wasn't done playing games. That afternoon, I returned from a client call to find my desk drawers open, files scattered, my workspace obviously searched. My personal coffee mug, a gift from my parents with Chinese characters for perseverance, was shattered on the floor. Maintenance accident, Bradley said, smirking from his cubicle across the aisle. Janitor knocked it over. Such a shame. The message was clear. They could get to my things. They were watching. 2 days later, I was copied on an email chain I definitely wasn't supposed to see. Someone in HR had hit reply all instead of just replying to Richard. The subject line was Lily Chen performance concerns. The email detailed fabricated complaints, missed deadlines. I'd never missed one. Client dissatisfaction. My clients consistently praised my work. Interpersonal conflicts. I'd had 0 HR incidents. Richard was building a paper trail, creating a justification to fire me if I didn't comply or to explain why I was passed over for promotion. I forwarded everything to my personal email. More evidence for the pile. That evening I worked late or pretended to. Most of the office had cleared out by 7 p.m. But I'd noticed Richard's calendar had a recurring Wednesday meeting labeled Private Do Not Schedule. Around 7:30, I heard voices from the direction of his office. Staying low, I moved closer. The door was cracked open slightly. Double quotes ... appreciate your discretion as always. Richard's voice drifted out. Of course. A woman's voice. Young, nervous. But Mr. Hartwell, about the promotion you mentioned ... These things take time, Vanessa. You know I'm doing everything I can. But I need to see continued commitment from you. My blood went cold. There was another one. Another woman he was manipulating. I pulled out my phone and started recording audio. The conversation continued. Richard making vague promises, Vanessa desperately asking about timelines, him deflecting and making increasingly personal comments about her appearance. When Vanessa finally left Richard's office, I caught a glimpse of her face. She was young, couldn't be more than 24. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged. She looked defeated. I followed her to the parking garage. Vanessa? She jumped, startled. I'm sorry, do I know you? Lily Chen. I work in project management. Can I talk to you for 5 minutes? It's important. She looked suspicious, exhausted. I really need to go. Richard Hartwell is doing the same thing to me that he's doing to you, I said quickly. And I'm collecting evidence to stop him, but I need to know I'm not the only one. I need to know if there are others. Vanessa's face crumbled. She leaned against her car, and suddenly she was crying deep, shaking sobs of someone who'd been holding everything in for too long. I thought I was going crazy, she whispered. I thought maybe I was misunderstanding or being too sensitive or, you're not crazy. He's a predator. And he's been doing this for years. Over the next hour, sitting in her car in that dimly lit garage, Vanessa told me everything. How Richard had started with compliments, then private meetings, then explicit propositions. How she'd said yes because she had student loans drowning her and couldn't afford to lose this job. How he'd made promises about promotions that never materialized. How she felt trapped, used, and completely powerless. There's another woman, Vanessa added quietly. Jennifer Park. She left the company 6 months ago. I heard rumors that Richard had something to do with it, but I never knew for sure. I got Jennifer's contact information. I got Vanessa's permission to include her testimony. And I got something else. A determination that had solidified from anger into cold, calculated resolve. Richard Hartwell thought he was untouchable. Thought his position, his connections, his expensive lawyers made him immune to consequences. He'd built a system that protected men like him and silenced women like us. But systems could be broken. And I was about to take a sledgehammer to his. By Thursday, I'd connected with Jennifer Park, who'd been forced out after rejecting Richard's advances. I'd documented 3 separate incidents with 3 different women. I'd collected emails, text messages, calendar records showing suspicious patterns. And I'd finalized my plan with Sarah. Friday afternoon, Richard called me into his office. "Time's up, Lily. What's your decision?" I looked at him. This man in his expensive suit, sitting in his corner office with its view of the bay, completely confident that he'd won. That he always won. "I need the weekend," I said. "This is a big decision. You said you understand that." His jaw tightened. "Monday morning, Lily. First thing. And if your answer is no, you should start updating your resume." I walked out of his office and I smiled. Because Richard Hartwell had no idea that Monday morning was going to be the worst day of his entire life. The trap was set. The evidence was compiled. The witnesses were ready. All that was left was to spring it in the most public, devastating way possible. That weekend, I barely slept. Saturday morning, I met Sarah at a coffee shop in Oakland, far enough from the financial district that no one from Hartwell Industries would accidentally spot us. She arrived with a laptop bag and the focused expression of someone who'd done this kind of work before. "You're sure about this?" Sarah asked, sliding into the booth across from me. "Once you hit that button, there's no going back. Hartwell Industries will come after you with everything they have." "They're already coming after me," I replied, showing her the fabricated HR emails on my phone. "Richard's building a termination case. If I don't do this now, I lose anyway, but quietly. With no evidence, no justice, and no way to stop him from doing it to the next woman." Sarah nodded slowly. "All right, let's make sure this is bulletproof." Over the next 4 hours, she walked me through the technical setup. The camera pin I'd worn had captured everything, but that was just the beginning. What we were planning for Monday was more ambitious, a live broadcast that would reach every employee in the company simultaneously. Hartwell Industries uses Cisco WebEx for their all-hands meetings, Sarah explained, pulling up system architecture diagrams on her laptop. The coup has admin privileges, which means Richard can schedule and launch company-wide broadcasts. If we can access his account for just 90 seconds, we can hijack the next scheduled meeting. How do we get his login credentials? Sarah's smile was sharp. "We don't need them. We need something better: social engineering and a carefully placed Trojan." "Does Richard ever leave his computer unlocked?" I thought back to dozens of observations. Every day. He walks out for coffee runs, bathroom breaks, phone calls. Never logs out. He's too important to bother with basic security protocols. Perfect. Arrogance is every hacker's best friend. She handed me a small USB drive, no bigger than my thumbnail. This contains a keystroke logger and remote access software. Plug it into any USB port on his computer for 15 seconds. That's all we need. It'll install silently, no icons, no notifications. From that point forward, I'll have complete access to his system. My hands shook slightly as I took the drive. This was crossing a line, probably several lines. But then I thought about Vanessa crying in that parking garage, Jennifer Park forced out of her career, and however many other women whose names I'd never know. "There's something else," I said, pulling out my notebook. "I want this to be more than just exposing Richard. I want evidence of the systemic cover-up. HR knows. Management knows. They've all protected him for years." Sarah leaned forward. "Can you prove that?" "I think so." Jennifer mentioned that she'd filed a formal complaint before she left. HR told her they'd investigate, then buried it. If we can access Richard's emails and HR's case files, we can show the pattern. "That's risky," Sarah warned. "That's not just exposing one predator, that's exposing corporate conspiracy. They'll fight back hard." "Good," I said. "Let them fight." Let everyone see exactly how dirty their hands are. Monday morning arrived with fog rolling in from the bay, turning the San Francisco skyline into ghostly silhouettes. I dressed carefully professional but unremarkable. Nothing that would draw attention. At 8:47 a.m., I walked into the Hartwell Industries building on California Street, badge scanned, elevator to the 14th floor, coffee from the break room. Just another Monday. Just another corporate drone starting another week. Richard was already in his office, visible through the glass walls, on a phone call. He saw me walk past and pointed at his watch, then held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes until he wanted my answer. I nodded and kept walking. My desk was exactly as I'd left it Friday, except for a small envelope placed prominently on my keyboard. Inside was a printed note on Hartwell Industries letterhead. Lily, final reminder that all company property, including digital files, are subject to review and audit at any time. Employees who remove confidential information face immediate termination and potential legal action. HR. They were threatening me, reminding me that they held all the power, that I was dispensable. What they didn't know was that every piece of evidence I'd collected was already backed up to 3 separate cloud servers, with copies sent to my personal attorney, a young civil rights lawyer named Marcus Webb that Sarah had connected me with. Marcus had been thrilled to take the case pro bono once he'd seen what we had. This is a civil rights attorney's dream case, Marcus had told me Sunday night. Quid pro quo harassment, hostile work environment, retaliation, corporate conspiracy to conceal illegal activity. Lily, if you pull this off, Hartwell Industries won't just face individual liability, they'll face institutional liability. We're talking tens of millions in damages. At 8:52 a.m., Richard stepped out of his office. Coffee run, he announced to no one in particular. Back in 10. This was it. My window. I grabbed my portfolio. Inside was the USB drive wrapped in tissue paper and walked calmly to Richard's office. The door was unlocked, his computer screen still lit up with his email inbox open. Classic Richard. Too self-important to bother with basic security. My heart hammered against my ribs as I plugged the USB drive into the port on the back of his desktop tower. 15 seconds, Sarah had said. I counted them off, watching the hallway through the glass walls. 10 seconds. The drive's tiny LED blinked once, twice. 11 seconds. Someone walked past Bradley, carrying a breakfast burrito and completely oblivious. 13 seconds. The LED went solid green. 15 seconds. I yanked the drive out, pocketed it, and walked out of Richard's office with a stack of papers I'd grabbed from his desk as cover for why I'd been there. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. A text from an encrypted number. We're in. Beautiful work. Phase 1 complete. At 9:02 a.m., Richard returned with his overpriced latte and called me into his office. I walked in carrying nothing but confidence I didn't entirely feel. Well, he said, settling into his chair like a king on a throne. Have you made the smart choice, or do I need to start the paperwork for your replacement? I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd built his career on the backs of women he'd manipulated and discarded. This man who'd never faced consequences because the system was designed to protect people like him. I've made my decision, I said calmly. And? I need one more thing before I give you my answer. His expression darkened. Lily, my patience has limits. I want the VP offer in writing. Salary, title, start date. I'm not making this kind of commitment based on verbal promises. For a moment, I thought he'd explode. But then he smiled because he thought he'd won. Thought this was just negotiation, a woman finally accepting how the game was played. Smart, he said, pulling up a document template on his computer. See? I knew you had potential. Let me draft something right now. While he typed, I watched his screen, memorizing details. Sarah would need them later. 5 minutes later, Richard printed out a letter on official Hartwell Industries letterhead, offering me the VP of Strategic Operations position at $185,000 annual salary, starting in 2 weeks. There, he said, handing it to me. Your golden ticket. All you have to do is say yes. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in my portfolio. More evidence. More proof of quid pro quo. "I'll have my answer for you tomorrow morning," I said. Richard's smile vanished. "Tomorrow?" "Lily, I just gave you everything you asked for, and I appreciate that. But this is a major life decision, and I need one night to think it through." "You said Monday morning, and technically, it's still Monday. So tomorrow morning, Tuesday first thing, you'll have my answer." I could see him calculating, deciding whether to push. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "Fine. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. But Lily, this your last extension." I left his office and went straight to the bathroom, where I allowed myself 30 seconds of shaking hands and rapid breathing. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah, "Tomorrow morning." "We do it tomorrow." Her reply came immediately. "I'll be ready." Let's burn it all down. The rest of Monday crawled by. I sat at my desk, going through the motions of work while Sarah remotely accessed Richard's computer, downloading years of emails, HR complaints, financial records showing hush money payments to former employees. Every piece of evidence we'd need to show this wasn't just about Richard, it was about an entire corporation that had enabled him. That evening, Vanessa and Jennifer met me at my apartment. We went over the plan one final time. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., Richard scheduled a strategic leadership team meeting with the senior VPs and directors. I explained. "It's a video conference, about 30 people on the call. Sarah's going to hijack the stream and broadcast it company-wide instead. Every employee, every screen, everyone will see what happens in that meeting. What if they shut it down?" Vanessa asked nervously. "They will, eventually," I admitted. "But by then, it'll be too late. The recording will be saved, distributed to media outlets, posted publicly." "You can't unring that bell." Jennifer leaned forward. "Lily, are you ready for what comes after?" "They're going to destroy you in the press. They'll call you disgruntled, vindictive, a liar. They'll dig into your past, your family, everything." "Let them," I said quietly. "Because I'm not doing this just for me. I'm doing this for every woman who sat in that office, faced that choice, and felt powerless. Tomorrow morning we take that power back." That night I barely slept again. I kept running through scenarios, contingencies, everything that could go wrong. But I also kept thinking about my mother's words when I told her I got the job at Hartwell Industries 5 years ago. "You worked hard for this, Lily. Never let anyone take your dignity. Money, jobs, those can be replaced. But once you lose your dignity, you lose yourself." Tomorrow, I was going to show Richard Hartwell and everyone at that company exactly what happened when you tried to take someone's dignity. Tomorrow, the entire world would be watching. And Richard Hartwell would finally face consequences he couldn't buy, charm, or threaten his way out of. Tuesday morning, 7:53 a.m. I walked into the Hartwell Industries building for what I knew might be the last time as an employee. The security guard, Miguel, who always asked about my weekend, smiled and waved me through. The barista at the lobby coffee shop handed me my usual order without me having to ask. Everything looked normal, felt normal. But in 7 minutes, nothing would ever be normal again. Sarah had sent me a final text at 6:30 a.m. All systems green. The moment you enter his office, I'll route the video feed. Every conference room, every desktop, every laptop logged into the company network. 847 employees will see everything. Ready? I'd replied with a single word. Ready. At 7:58 a.m., I stood outside Richard's office. Through the glass walls, I could see him on a video call. The strategic leadership team meeting was already in progress. 30 senior leaders from across the company all logged in, discussing quarterly projections and market strategies. Richard saw me waiting and held up one finger. 1 minute. I adjusted the camera pin on my lapel, a different one this time, with a wider angle and better audio. Sarah was already receiving the feed, ready to merge it with Richard's own webcam for the perfect split-screen view. At exactly 8 a.m., Richard muted his microphone and waved me in. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, unmuting briefly. "I need 5 minutes to handle a personnel matter. Don't start the Austin expansion discussion without me." He muted again and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, Lily. Let's finish this." I sat down, placing my portfolio on my lap. On my phone, hidden in the portfolio's side pocket, I'd opened an encrypted messaging app. One tap would signal Sarah to execute the hijack. "So," Richard said, leaning back with that familiar arrogance, "you've had your time to think. Are you going to be smart about this, or do we need to have a different kind of conversation?" "I want to make absolutely sure I understand the arrangement," I said calmly. "You're offering me the VP position in exchange for a personal relationship with you. Is that correct?" Richard glanced at his video conference, still on mute, the other participants still visible in their little boxes on his screen, waiting for him to return. "Let's not be crude about it, Lily. I'm offering you mentorship, access to opportunities, and yes, a more intimate professional relationship. Think of it as an investment in your future. And if I refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then I'll accept your resignation, effective immediately. You'll be escorted out by security within the hour." And given the performance concerns I've documented over the past 2 weeks, I imagine finding equivalent employment will be challenging. "San Francisco is a small professional community. You'd blacklist me. I'd be honest about my experience working with you," he corrected smoothly. "Now, what's your answer?" I tapped my phone once. The signal sent. "My answer," I said clearly, looking directly at him, "is that you're a sexual predator who's been coercing women into sexual relationships for years, and you're about to face consequences for every single victim you've created." Richard's face went blank with confusion. "What, Mr. Hartwell?" A woman's voice came from his computer speakers, one of the VPs on the video call. "Mr. Hartwell, what's happening?" "Your video just went full screen for everyone." Richard spun toward his monitor, and I watched the color drain from his face. The video conference hadn't gone full screen just for him. It had gone full screen for every single employee in the company. Every desktop computer, every laptop, every conference room display, all of them were now showing Richard's office. Split screen. His webcam feed on one side, my camera pin's view on the other. 847 employees were now watching us in real time. "What the hell did you do?" Richard lunged for his computer, trying to close the application. But Sarah had locked him out. The keyboard commands did nothing. The mouse clicks were useless. "I documented everything," I said, standing up and pulling printed documents from my portfolio. Every conversation, every threat, every quid pro quo offer. I placed them on his desk one by one, speaking clearly so the microphone would capture every word. Email from Richard Hartwell to Jennifer Park. March 2023. Your continued employment depends on your flexibility regarding our arrangement. Richard was frantically unplugging cables now, trying to kill the video feed manually. But Sarah had thought of that too the moment his webcam disconnected. The feed switched entirely to my camera pin. Text message from Richard Hartwell to Vanessa Rodriguez, October 2023. The promotion you want requires discretion. Meet me at the Fairmont, room 847 Thursday evening. "Stop talking," Richard shouted. "You're fired. Security. Tato murity. You're at security. Thursday evening. Thursday evening. Thursday evening. Stop talking," Richard shouted. "You're fired. Security. Richard. Security. The command. Someone get security." But no one was coming, because everyone was watching. HR complaint filed by Jennifer Park, May 2023, detailing sexual harassment by Richard Hartwell. HR buried it because Richard is the COO's golden boy.
Reason
On my
given.
phone, I could see
Insufficient
Sarah's
evidence.
encrypted messages
I placed
flooding
that
in.
document down.
Slack is exploding.
Except there was evidence.
Everyone's messaging everyone.
Jennifer had emails,
Emergency calls
witnesses,
going to HR
documentation.
and legal. They're in panic mode. Recording secured. Already sent to 3 news outlets. Richard had stopped trying to shut down the computer. He was just standing there now, staring at me with something between rage and dawning horror. "You have no idea what you've just done," he said quietly. "I will destroy you. My lawyers will bury you in lawsuits. You'll lose everything." "I'm already losing everything," I interrupted. "You made sure of that. You were going to fire me whether I said yes or no. The only difference is, now everyone knows why." I pulled out the final document, The VP offer letter he'd given me yesterday. This is a written offer for promotion, dated 1 day after you propositioned me in this office. Quid pro quo sexual harassment, documented and timestamped. You literally created evidence of your own crime. The office phone started ringing. Richard's cell phone started ringing. And then there was pounding on his office door. Security had finally arrived, but they weren't coming for me. Standing behind the security guards was Hartwell Industries' CEO, Douglas Hartwell, Richard's uncle, the man who'd hired him, protected him, enabled him for 15 years. The door burst open. Douglas's face was ashen. Richard. My office now. Uncle Doug, she's lying. This is all fabricated. I just watched you threaten to blacklist an employee for refusing your sexual advances, Douglas said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. We have 800 witnesses and apparently multiple news organizations who've already received recordings. Legal is on line 1, PR is having a collective breakdown, and our stock price just dropped 4 points in the last 3 minutes. He turned to me. Ms. Chen, our attorneys will be contacting you. Until then, you're on paid administrative leave. Richard, he turned back to his nephew. You're suspended effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Richard's face had gone from red to gray. You can't. I'm the coup. You were the coup. Now you're a liability we can't afford. Douglas looked at me again, and I saw something unexpected in his eyes. Respect mixed with fear. Ms. Chun, I strongly suggest you retain legal counsel. This situation is far from over. I already have, I replied. Marcus Webb from the Civil Rights Legal Foundation. He's very interested in discussing not just Richard's actions, but the institutional pattern of harassment and cover-up at Hartwell Industries. Douglas's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. This wasn't just about Richard anymore. This was about the entire company's liability for years of enabling predatory behavior. Security moved forward to escort Richard out. As they led him past me, he leaned in close and whispered, "This isn't over. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." I looked him directly in the eyes and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You already tried that." It didn't work. As Richard was marched through the office past cubicles full of employees who'd watched everything, past the women he'd harassed who were now crying with relief and vindication, past Bradley who looked like he'd seen a ghost, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but something cleaner, stronger, justice. My phone buzzed continuously with messages. From Vanessa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. From Jennifer. I'm crying. You did it. You actually did it. From Sarah. Video has 50,000 views already and climbing. CNN wants an interview. So does the New York Times. From Marcus Webb. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Hartwell's attorneys just called asking about settlement negotiations. Don't agree to anything yet. And then one more message from an unknown number. This is Rebecca Torres. I worked at Hartwell Industries 2019 to 2020. Richard Hartwell harassed me too. I was too afraid to speak up then. Can I add my testimony now? If you've ever felt powerless against someone who thought they were untouchable, subscribe to this channel because what happened next proved that sometimes the system does break and justice does win. But the fight wasn't over yet. Within an hour, 3 more women had contacted me with similar stories. Within 2 hours, Hartwell Industries stock had dropped 12%. Within 3 hours, the board of directors had called an emergency meeting. By end of business Tuesday, Richard Hartwell had been terminated for cause, stripped of his severance package, and served with a civil lawsuit from Jennifer Park and Vanessa Rodriguez, with my testimony as the cornerstone of their case. But my real victory came 3 days later, when I received an email from a college student in Boston. I saw your video. My boss has been doing the same thing to me. I was going to quit and just accept it. But you showed me that I don't have to. I'm filing a complaint tomorrow. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about Richard Hartwell or Hartwell Industries. It was about changing the calculation, making predators understand that their victims might just have more power than they realized. Richard had thought he held all the cards. He'd thought his position, his connections, his lawyers made him untouchable. He'd been wrong. 18 months later, the view from my office window overlooked the San Francisco Bay, but this time it was different. This wasn't someone else's corner office that I'd fought to reach. This was mine, earned, deserved, untainted. My name is still Lily Chen, but I'm no longer the woman who sat trembling in Richard Hartwell's office, calculating whether speaking up would cost me everything. That woman was gone. Someone stronger had taken her place. The Chen Consulting Group occupied the entire 7th floor of a renovated building in Soma. 32 employees, all working on corporate compliance, harassment prevention training, and institutional accountability systems. We'd launched 6 months after the Hartwell scandal broke. Funded initially by the settlement money from my lawsuit, $4.3 million, that Hartwell Industries paid to make their liability disappear. I'd used every penny to build something that mattered. Lily, my assistant Maya, knocked on the open door. Your 2 p.m. is here. The keynote prep for the Stanford Business School talk next week. Send them in. 3 young women entered. MBA students preparing a case study on corporate whistleblowing and institutional change. The Hartwell Industries scandal had become required reading in business ethics classes across the country. Ms. Chun, thank you for meeting with us, the first student said, settling into the chairs across from my desk. We've been studying the Hartwell case and there's something we can't quite figure out. You had evidence, you had witnesses, but you could have gone to HR or hired a lawyer and sued quietly. Why did you choose public exposure? I've been asked this question dozens of times, by journalists, by lawyers, by women who reached out, asking for advice on their own situations. And every time, my answer was the same. Because private settlements don't change systems, I said. They silence victims with non-disclosure agreements and allow predators to move on to the next company, the next victim. Public exposure is messier, riskier, but it's the only way to create real accountability. The second student leaned forward. But it cost you, didn't it? The media coverage was brutal. They called you a vindictive employee, attention-seeking, even questioned your competence. For about 3 weeks, yes. Then 15 more women came forward with similar stories about Richard Hartwell. Then other women started speaking up about other executives at other companies, using my case as a template. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. I wasn't vindictive, I was the catalyst for a reckoning that was long overdue. The third student consulted her notes. What happened to Richard Hartwell? I pulled up a news article on my computer and turned the screen toward them. The headline read, Former tech executive sentenced to 18 months for witness intimidation. Richard violated the restraining order I filed, I explained. He showed up at my apartment building twice, sent threatening emails to witnesses, and tried to bribe a former colleague to change her testimony. The criminal charges stuck. He served 14 months in minimum security, got out last April. And now? Now he's radioactive. No company will hire him. His marriage dissolved. His wife left him when the full extent of his affairs became public. His professional network abandoned him. Last I heard, he was working as a contract recruiter for a staffing agency in Sacramento, making about $40,000 a year. One of the students looked uncomfortable. Do you ever feel bad about that? How completely his life fell apart? I considered the question carefully. I feel bad that it took so many women suffering before consequences finally caught up to him. I feel bad that the system protected him for 15 years. But do I feel bad that he lost the life he built on exploitation and abuse? No, that life was built on a foundation of cruelty. It deserved to collapse. After the students left, I had a video call with Vanessa Rodriguez. She'd left Hartwell Industries 6 months after the scandal and was now the director of compliance at a cybersecurity firm in Austin. How's the new gig? I asked. Vanessa grinned. Incredible. I actually got promoted last month based on my work, not on who I was willing to compromise myself for. Novel concept. Her expression softened. Lily, I never properly thanked you. What you did, what you risked, you gave me my career back. You gave me my dignity back. You were brave enough to add your testimony. I reminded her. That took courage. Only because you went first. You showed me it was possible to fight back and win. Jennifer Park messaged me later that afternoon. She'd gone back to school, earned her MBA, and was now a VP at a sustainable energy startup. Her lawsuit against Hartwell Industries had settled for $2.7 million. Use the settlement to pay off student loans and invest in 3 women-led startups, her message read. One of them just got acquired. Karma really does work, but sometimes it needs a little help. Thank you for being that help. That evening, I met my parents for dinner at their favorite dim sum place in Richmond District. My mother looked at me across the table, her eyes shining with pride. Your father and I watched your interview on 60 Minutes, she said in Mandarin. We didn't understand everything, but we understood enough. You did what was right, even when it was hard. My father, who'd spent 40 years working with his hands and rarely talked about emotions, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. When you were little, I told you, make something of yourself. But I was wrong. You already were something. You just needed to show the world. I've been asked to speak at dozens of conferences, universities, and corporate events. The speaking fees alone were enough to live on comfortably. But more importantly, the platform gave me access to create real change. 3 months ago, I testified before the California State Legislature in support of a bill extending the statute of limitations for workplace harassment claims. It passed. Last month, I'd consulted with the EEOC on updating federal guidelines for investigating power-based harassment. Next week, I was keynoting a Women in Technology conference with 4,000 attendees. But the moment that mattered most came on a random Tuesday, when a young woman named Sarah, a different Sarah, not my hacker friend, emailed me. Miss Chen, I'm a paralegal at a law firm in Chicago. My boss has been making inappropriate comments, and yesterday he cornered me in the copy room. I'm terrified to report it because he's a senior partner. But then I remembered your story. I remembered that you were scared too. But you did it anyway. So I'm doing it. I'm filing a complaint tomorrow. I just wanted you to know that your courage is creating ripples. Thank you. That's what made everything worth it. Not the settlement money, not the media attention, not even watching Richard Hartwell face consequences. It was knowing that somewhere, women who'd felt powerless were finding their power. As for Richard Hartwell himself, I only saw him once more after that day in his office. It was 8 months ago at a Starbucks near Union Square. I was meeting a potential client. He was in line wearing a cheap suit that didn't quite fit, holding a worn leather briefcase, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Our eyes met. For a moment, I saw him calculating whether to approach me, whether to say something. But whatever he saw in my expression made him think better of it. He looked away, paid for his coffee, and left quickly. I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. I just felt nothing. He wasn't worth my emotional energy anymore. He was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. The real victory wasn't his destruction. It was my construction building a life and a career that helped prevent other women from going through what I'd experienced. Sarah, my hacker friend Sarah, had moved to San Francisco and was now my head of technology and security. Over coffee one morning, she'd asked me the same question everyone asked. Was it worth it? I'd thought about everything I'd lost, the job I'd worked years to earn, the naive belief that the system would protect me, the comfortable ignorance that comes from not knowing how broken things really are. And then I'd thought about everything I'd gained: self-respect, purpose, a platform to create change, and the knowledge that I'd fought back when it would have been easier to stay silent. Yes, I told her. Every single second of it was worth it. The best revenge isn't destroying the person who wronged you. It's building something so undeniably successful, so genuinely good, that it stands as permanent proof they were wrong about you. Richard Hartwell thought I was nothing without his patronage, that I'd crumble under pressure, that I was too weak to fight back. He'd been wrong about everything. Today, I run a successful consulting firm that's changing how corporations handle power dynamics and harassment. I mentor young women navigating toxic workplaces. I speak at conferences where executives are forced to confront uncomfortable truths about their own institutions. And every single day I wake up knowing that I didn't just survive Richard Hartwell's attempt to destroy me, I turned that destruction into creation. Richard Hartwell tried to break me because he thought I was fragile. But pressure doesn't break everyone. Sometimes it creates diamonds. If you've ever been told you're not enough, or felt powerless against someone who held all the cards, remember this: power isn't something given to you by others. It's something you discover within yourself when you decide you're done being silent. And if this story reminded you of your own strength, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the only way we change broken systems is by refusing to let them break us. The door to my office caught the afternoon light, casting long shadows across the floor. On my desk sat a framed quote I'd hung up the day we opened. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Richard Hartwell had tried to bury me. Instead, I'd grown into something he never anticipated. Something stronger, more resilient, and absolutely unbreakable. And that, in the end, was the only revenge that truly mattered.